Not fair. Ring chasing. Big markets versus small markets. As the dust settles on the buyout market and veterans in search of a championship seek greener pastures, these same empty complaints come up every year. Those grievances have been amplified this season by the fact the buyout market was dominated by big name vets joining stacked contenders.
Blake Griffin at the 5 to begin the 4th. Griffin on the move, flushes it down. There's the dunk.
Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge join the Nets. Andre Drummond is now a Laker, and DeMarcus Cousins is a Clipper. But whether you're a fan who doesn't quite grasp how inconsequential these moves are, or you're an envious team looking up at the Nets, Lakers, and Clippers in the standings, you've gotta stop whining about this every damn year. There's nothing unfair about it. For as long as most of us can remember, star partnerships, buyouts, and veterans putting themselves in the best position to complete their careers with championship rings has been commonplace in the NBA and pro sports in general.
This is the way it's always been done.
You've also got to keep the buyout editions of the last couple weeks in perspective and not let the cachet of names like Griffin, Aldridge, Drummond, and Cousins distract from the substance. Mid-season buyout acquisitions in general are often overrated due to name recognition. Griffin and Aldridge joining the Nets is a perfect example of this. Yes, both players have legitimate Hall of Fame arguments. They've combined for 13 All-Star appearances and 10 All-NBA selections. Both were All-Stars as recently as 2 years ago, and Griffin even made an All-NBA team in 2018-19. But anyone who's been paying attention understands that the on-court impact of Griffin and Aldridge will be much more in line with the minimum contracts they signed to join Brooklyn than with the more lucrative contracts they were bought out of by Detroit and San Antonio. There's a reason the guys we're talking about headlined a feature I wrote last month about the washed up big man market.
Well, what was the reason?
I had a reason.
What was the reason?
I had a reason.
What was the reason?
Love Cardi. Anyway, it's true that the Nets can now play an entire lineup of 2019 All-Stars. But it's also disingenuous to insinuate the 2021 versions of Griffin and Aldridge resemble anything close to their 2019 forms. Blake himself summarized this perfectly in a recent scrum with reporters, noting that it's funny how all he's heard for the last couple years is how bad he is. But now he joins a championship favorite and suddenly it's not fair? What's often lost in a jealous rage and an immediate need to cry foul about where these players are going is why players were bought out in the first place. If rival teams felt Griffin was still a game-changing talent, at least one would have traded for the former superstar and the $38.9 million player option for next season that came with him. If Aldridge's on-court impact matched his $24 million salary for this season, either the Spurs would have had more use for him, or another contender would have ponied up real talent and assets for him.
That is true.
Either way, Aldridge wouldn't have had to give up more than $7 million in 2020-2021 salary, and the Spurs wouldn't have let him walk for nothing in return. Cousins is just a shell of his former self at this point after a string of devastating injuries. Even just being big doesn't come easy to Boogie anymore. He can't even finish in the restricted area, where he's as inefficient as undersized guards. Drummond's case is more of an outlier, as the 27-year-old is much closer to his prime than players like Griffin, Aldridge, or Cousins. And he was still posting gaudy numbers in Cleveland.
Andre to the bucket, gets fouled, puts it up and in, and Andre Drummond has a chance for the three-point play.
How can the defending champions, with LeBron James and Anthony Davis already in tow, just casually add a player averaging better than 17 points, 13 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, and a block for nothing smack dab in the middle of the season? The answer is that the market itself dictated these terms. If Drummond's impact actually matched his statistical production or his $28.8 million salary in the final year of his max contract, an interested team would have cobbled together a trade package worth something to the Cavs. If a rival contender was that concerned about him joining the Lakers and solidifying the champs' shoddy frontcourt, they could have done something about it before the trade deadline. The truth is, no team believed the sacrifice necessary to match salary in a trade for Drummond was worth the reward. or outweighed the risk of him joining a stacked team like the Lakers. That was a reasonable cost-benefit analysis and a justifiable decision. Now, those teams can live with the consequences of that decision.
Why do my actions have consequences?
I will admit, it is true that teams do feel pressure to keep players and agents happy with a buyout. But again, it's only an issue when a trade can't be worked out. Free agents have the right to make whatever decisions they feel best benefit themselves, their careers, and their families. Whether they reach free agency in the traditional sense at the expiration of their contracts, or whether a buyout agreement allows them to become free agents in the middle of the season. And capped out teams can still sign players to minimum contracts. Maybe the NBA could institute a rule where teams can only sign one bought out player per season, or something like that. But you can't pick and choose when free agency or the league's collective bargaining agreement is unjust based on which teams benefit from it at what time.
Don't tell me what to do.
And finally, it should be noted that the teams in position to land the best talent available on the buyout market are in this position for a reason. And contrary to what small market GMs will tell you, that reason isn't just location. Any team or fan upset about the last couple weeks should be taking notes from the Nets, Lakers, and Clippers, rather than wasting time complaining about them. Under general manager Sean Marks, the Nets rose from the ashes of the most hopeless situation in league history. Despite limited avenues for improvement, Brooklyn built a scrappy and exciting young team that played smart basketball on both ends.
Detroit 93, Nets 92, LeVert redirects, Allen on the roll, sweet.
A core of Spencer Dinwiddie, Joe Harris, Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, and D'Angelo Russell eventually put the Nets in position to land Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving using a plethora of cap space in 2019, and to trade for James Harden in 2021. That's how the Nets eventually found themselves, put themselves in the position to now be most attractive to Griffin and Aldridge, two veterans who yearn for a championship. Being situated in New York City certainly helped the Nets in the franchise's quest to become a free agent destination. But the Knicks are the city's legacy franchise, play in what's considered the basketball mecca, and their biggest free agency prize was Amari Stoudemire 11 years ago.
I have nothing to add. I mean, the Knicks are...
You look so depressed, Stephen A.
It's very depressing.
San Antonio is one of the league's smallest markets, but during the Spurs' two-decade run of perennial contention, a number of high-profile buyout candidates chose the Alamo City, including Tracy McGrady. Aldridge himself joined the Spurs as a marquee free agent in 2015. Small market teams can't cry foul now because the Spurs are on the other side of the NBA's cyclical equation. Say what you will about the Lakers devolving into one of the NBA's laughingstocks before acquiring LeBron simply because they're the Lakers and based in Los Angeles. But the team also drafted well enough to turn Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, and Josh Hart, among others, into Davis.
Forgot about that.
The Clippers' decision to sell the farm for Paul George, and in turn Kawhi Leonard, may backfire in the long run. But don't forget that before that free agency coup, the organization built a culture that overhauled the previous perception of the franchise and had Shai Gilgeous-Alexander plus a built-up haul of draft capital to offer the Thunder for George. The Clippers didn't miraculously become a mid-season destination overnight because of advantages unavailable to smaller market teams, or to poorly run teams who often find themselves on the outside looking in by this point of the season. They just went about their business better than those teams. The Warriors drafted the dynastic trio of Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green before Kevin Durant or any other veteran free agents thought about taking their talents to the Bay. Golden State offered a sunny California market boasting a passionate fan base for decades. When did that ever help the Warriors before they began to operate in a manner that was light years ahead of the competition? Other than the fame of the free agents available, there was nothing unusual or unfair about this year's buyout market. People just love to complain, especially when they come out on the losing end of a game, season, or transaction. Championship contention in the NBA is ultra exclusive, as it always has been in a star-driven league of haves and have-nots. Everyone cries about it until their team's the one sitting at the cool kids table. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video and want to see more content like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button.